AI advances all the time, and it just becomes part of our societal baseline. So that's why I call it advanced software, because right now when we use ChatGPT, we think about it as AI, but in 5 years, it's just going to be ChatGPT.
This is Technologically Speaking, the official podcast for the Department of Homeland Security Science and Technology Directorate, or S&T as we call it. Join us as we meet the science and technology experts on the front lines keeping America safe.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Technologically Speaking. I'm one of your hosts, Brittany Greco, and I'm so thankful that we are joined today by Dr. Amy Henninger, Senior Advisor for Advanced Computing at DHS S&T. Amy, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Brittany, it's great to be with you. Thank you so much.
Just to get things started, can you help us understand the difference between adversarial AI and other forms of AI?
Sure, absolutely, Brittany. Thank you for that question. You can think of adversarial AI as the nefarious use of AI, right? So this is the use of AI by different threats, whether they be nation states or transnational criminals or even hacktivists. So any threat who wants to use AI in a way that is counterproductive to our Homeland Security missions, that would be considered an example of adversarial AI.
And then how is that different from like a cyber attack? Or is it just like a different kind of cyber attack?
Yeah, so they are a little different. A cyber attack can be achieved against software that's not AI. A cyber attack can also be achieved against AI-based software.
Okay.
Adversarial doesn't have to be achieved against AI. We can think of an adversarial attack like a morphing GAN. What is a morphing GAN? So a morphing GAN is you take two genuine pictures. So let's say we have a picture of Brittany and a picture of Amy, okay? And we want to morph those two pictures together in such a way that we have a new fake image, right? And that fake image now looks a little bit like Brittany and a little bit like Amy. And let's say you put that on your driver's license. Let's say you put that on your passport, whatever, but it's in a database. All of a sudden, that single ID can be used both for you and for me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if you think of that, a kind of attack, I can present this passport and it doesn't look exactly like me, but it looks enough like me that the officer says, okay, that's fine. But he thinks I'm Brittany. Maybe, for example. On the other, yeah, because it looks like you too. And in the database, it says it's you, but in the officer, he says, yeah, it looks enough like her. But so you can take that same thing and translate that to an automated facial recognition system. So this kind of attack, it's AI against people, like the TSA officer or the Border Patrol agent, but it could also be AI against a system. So let's say we have this automated facial recognition system and they're comparing the passport photo with my picture, right, at the TSA gate. And it says, yes, it's Amy, but oh, by the way, it could match Brittany. So the difference between adversarial AI is that it could be used against people. It could be used against non-AI systems like software that doesn't have AI in it. Cyber attacks are only used against software, right? Cyber attacks, they can have ramifications on people, but they're only achieved through software. And adversarial AI attacks can be achieved with people or with AI or with software.
And I think that distinction is important because it does seem like adversarial AI then it potentially has huge repercussions, real world, digital world. To your point about it's not just affecting a digital system, but it can be used to fool people who we usually use as, oh, these are experts in their field who will be able to check this. But it's something that can definitely undermine those human-based security systems that we have.
That's true. And that's why it's so important for DHS, right? Because we have a lot of human-based security systems. So it has, it's a immediate threat to us, either for our AI systems that are fielded, but also for systems that are not AI based that can be attacked by AI.
Why do you think it's important to define these terms and to have shared understanding of what we mean specifically when we reference adversarial machine learning versus adversarial AI versus cyber attacks?
A lot of times, word definitions get us into trouble because we don't give them enough precision. You want to be sure as you're starting this kind of work that you're being comprehensive in your thinking.
Hmm.
Okay. And it's very easy, for example, to say, we've done something like this before. It was called cybersecurity. So I'm just going to assume everything I did in cybersecurity, start from there and tailor it to adversarial AI. And the problem with that is if you don't go back to first principles and think hard about what adversarial AI means to your organization, you're going to pull in assumptions that might not be true.
Mm.
You're just going to start with this is where we were 20 years ago. So that's one of the reasons. The other reason is that we have a very robust cybersecurity R&D program at S&T. It's led by my good chum at DC, Donald Culture. You've interviewed him, I think, maybe in the past, or somebody has. Yeah. So he's a great guy. And he has a very nice cybersecurity portfolio. And we wanted to make sure that we understood the distinction between cybersecurity and adversarial AI so that we stay coordinated, so that we don't waste resources, so we could understand interfaces and synergies that we should have, ways of leveraging each other's work, but yet maintain full independent portfolios. I think lastly is that it's important when you're communicating with other people so they understand what you're talking about, right? Because there's this thing called AI security, and some people liken that to counter AI. Some people liken it to adversarial machine learning. Some people
Mm.
liken it to adversarial AI. But we all have to understand what those terms mean to us. So when we talk with each other, we understand that we're comparing apples to apples
That makes sense.
and,
And
and not apples to fruitcake that sometimes has apples in it.
oh man, see, now I got to wonder about fruitcake recipes. I'm embarrassed to say we didn't define what AI means at the beginning of this episode.
Man, no, that's a really great question. And that's really a huge issue for the AI community. So there is not a common definition that universally accepted. And the definition I like always gets me in trouble with mathematicians and statisticians. So I call AI advanced software.
Okay.
And here's why. AI, we all know that AI is software, right? It's embodied in software. And smart people will say, yeah, but there's so much math in it in the machine learning, right? And there are exactly no qualms about that whatsoever. But AI is bigger than just machine learning, right? Machine learning and deep learning, that's just the thing we're doing now. But AI is bigger than that. AI has been around since before you and I were born, right? Since before I was born, for sure. And things that we take for granted today once started out as AI. Okay. So at one point, there was something called Deep Blue, right? And
Oh
that
yeah,
was, you've heard of this, right?
I
Very
have.
good. IBM chess program, AI based chess program on high performance computer,
Mm-hmm.
supercomputer at the time that actually beat Gary Kasparov, right? The chess grand master champion of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some idiosyncrasies in that match, but it beat him. It turns out that was like over 20 years ago, like maybe 25-ish, 30, maybe, I don't know about that. But it turns out that you could have a deep blue like program on your iPhone now as an app, right?
Wow.
We don't think of that as AI. We just think of that as a chess game,
Yeah.
right? There was a time when optical character recognition, OCR, right? So the way computers read numbers or letters and that
Mm-hmm.
they let you transcribe letters into typing, for example, right? There was a time when that was pretty intense AI, an image processing field in AI. But then we solved it, right? So we solved it and it just becomes something we use now. AI advances all the time and it just becomes part of our societal baseline. So that's why I call it advanced software because right now when we use Chat GPT, we think about it as AI,
Mm-hmm.
but in 5 years, it's just going to be Chat GPT. So AI is the threshold and it's constantly advancing as we solve problems. So that's why I just say it's advanced software. And people who are not software people hate that because They want it to be special, that you have to be special to be able to do AI. But to me, it's just advanced software.
So you mentioned morphing as one of the types of adversarial AI threats. Are there any others that folks might be familiar with or that might be really emerging that they should know about?
Sure, that's a great one. One of them that people are really starting to hear a lot about casually would be deep fakes, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And some people would call morphing a type of a deep fake. So again, this is sort of a language and taxonomy issue. Deep stands for deep learning, and fake obviously stands for fake or fake media.
Hmm.
And they put those two words together. So typically, what you think of when you hear of a deep fake is you're going to put Brittany's face on a picture of Amy, right? So all of a sudden you have Amy with Brittany's face. So that might be one. Or you could have like the morphing one I talked about before. You could do a deep fake of a voice. This is a really interesting example. In a company in the UK and a financial analyst, I think in Hong Kong, and for that same company, first of all, there was an email, and the like chief financial officer or the chief operating officer said, I need you to cut a check for like $25 million. And this is to the guy in Hong Kong. And the guy in Hong Kong says, that doesn't seem quite right because that number is really out of the ordinary
Right.
for what I would typically hear. So he called him on it, and he thought this was a phishing email or something
Hmm.
that was not legitimate. So the attacker, right, they upped the game because it was an attack. The financial analyst in Hong Kong made the right call, but the attacker upped the game and he said, so let's have a Zoom call and talk it over. Okay. The financial analyst says, okay, in case it's legitimate, I'll hear it and see it for myself.
Sure.
So the attacker arranged for the Zoom call, and on this Zoom call was the chief financial officer, and a couple of the other C-suite officers were on this call also with the financial analyst. And they were explaining to the financial analyst the importance of him cutting this check and why he needed to do it, and they needed it right away. The financial analyst saw 3 or 4 people from his leadership team telling him to do something, so he did it. And it
Sure.
turned out that Zoom call was completely fake. So
Oh my
those
gosh.
every single one of them, not just the guy that did the initial email, but even the supporting characters, they were all deep fakes, basically telling this financial analyst to cut the check, and he did, and then the company's out $25 million. Obviously, that's a threat right now. And there's ways you can detect this, right? A lot of times you want to look for like eyes, if they're not blinking at all or if they're blinking too much. You want to look at how their mouth is moving and their facial expressions. A lot of times you can ask the person, like if you want to verify it's not a deep fake, you can ask them to like turn their head 45 degrees. And sometimes
Oh.
that kind of screws up the algorithm and it'll get like kind of blurry or choppy or something. So there's ways of detecting those, but the deepfakes are getting better and better all the time. And of course,
Hmm.
there's automated mechanisms to detect them too. But that's like turning into a cat and mouse game, just like cybersecurity did, right? So another attack that is pretty important would be an adversarial perturbation attack. Let's say you have a surveillance system, right, where you're
Hmm.
identifying people on the street, for example. There are ways of dressing or putting on makeup or putting on glasses such that the AI algorithm will break, right? It doesn't classify like it would have
Oh.
otherwise. Another really pretty famous example would be stop signs. There's been a lot of research about autonomous vehicles, right? So
Hmm.
autonomous vehicles will come up to a stop sign. They recognize that sign as a stop sign. They know what to do. There's ways of putting tape or patches or sticky notes, what have you, on a stop sign in a way that might look random to a person, but in a way that would trick the autonomous vehicle into thinking that's not really a stop sign. It's a sign that says speed up to 45
Oof.
miles per hour, right?
Yeah.
So that's the key about the evasion attacks. They're tricky in the sense that a person wouldn't naturally notice it,
Hmm.
but it's enough to trick the algorithm into thinking, you know, the coming to a wrong conclusion.
I think what's so scary about these types of attacks is that you can't trust your senses, what you see, and you can't trust this technology that we've all, at this point, come to rely on for a lot of our everyday lives. I don't have a
Yes.
conclusion to that. It's just scary.
Well, you're right. And that, as you read the literature, especially in the deepfake space, that is a common concern across a lot of the researchers is they'll say that as long as content has been around, there has been fake content, right?
Yeah.
And as long as digital content has been around, there has been fake digital content. In history and in the computing history, image processing algorithms and stuff were just available to niche markets.
Hmm.
And then Photoshop came out and people did stuff. But now it's really elegant algorithms processing, right? Developing these deep fakes. And those are available in TikTok, right?
Right.
Those are available at GitHub. And anybody can do it. It's becoming very democratized,
Hmm.
and that people expect that to, like, flood the market with deep fakes, and they say that society has always adjusted to fake content, right?
I would say
That
yes and no.
it's fair. I think that's fair, but I think some people are concerned not just with the fact that we're gonna be faked, but that we're gonna become distrusting of everything.
Yeah.
Right? So that's some researchers, that's the bigger concern.
Yeah. That's a fair point. Is taking us to the natural conclusion of if you can't trust what you see, then gosh, how do you get that trust back?
So the old saying, "A picture is worth 1,000 words," that's like flying out the window.
So, what
Mhm.
is S&T's role in this space? Understanding that AI systems are sometimes owned by private companies. There's a lot of this stuff that's going to be readily available out on the web. What is our role at S&T as we think about adversarial AI?
Yeah, that's another great question. This space is where cybersecurity was 20 years ago.
Hmm.
So the government is just organizing to understand which agencies and organizations should be doing what, right? And how is this all going to work? So we're in that place right now. And in S&T, I think we're basically I'm going to say we're doing two big things, really large muscle movements. We have a mission of direct homeland security processes and missions, but then we have this broader one for the entire homeland. So S&T right now is mostly focused on assessing systems and processes on homeland security missions to make sure they're not susceptible to these adversarial AI attacks. But we're also thinking through broader implications, societal implications, right? In terms of misinformation, disinformation, malinformation. What kinds of things can we do to prevent types of scenarios for the broader population?
I like how you characterized S&T's work as these sort of larger muscle movements with supporting activities underneath. We've talked a little bit about how adversarial AI can impact both human senses and digital systems. So in our research, in our work here at S&T, is there a component of social science of understanding like how do people consume this information?
Yes and no. There is. It's probably not as tightly coupled as we want it to be,
Hmm.
but we do have work in S&T going on in, like, understanding online harms, for example,
Oh, okay.
and how they propagate, what the risk is, how to mitigate. And that would be very tightly coupled to deepfakes in the social media space, for example. So we haven't connected all those dots, but it's definitely on the roadmap to happen.
Okay. I want to ask about how S&T, because you mentioned before, there's a lot of different government organizations who are working on this, making sure we're all using the same language is a good first step. But how is S&T coordinating with other agencies? Like, I'm sure there's a defense component to this, an intelligence component to this, the ability that you can speak to it. Like, how are we coordinating with other organizations on this research and development?
Yeah, so right now, I would say that space is loosely coordinated,
Hmm.
loosely coupled, not formally coordinated in the R&D side, right? Now, there are bigger processes that have to happen just like they do in cybersecurity, right? There's going to be formal threat models that need to be developed. There are going to be incident response teams
Yeah.
someday that have to be developed. And there's going to be like an information sharing component between industry and government, right? All that stuff in cybersecurity, we're going to have that kind of stuff in the AI space too for
Mhm.
adversarial AI. But right now, in terms of R&D at least, we do a lot of coordination with the DoD Research and Engineering, DARPA. We do a lot of interfacing with DARPA. We're looking at maybe assessing some of the tools that they've developed to see how they can support Homeland Security missions. 2 months ago, we had a workshop in the UK, a joint workshop with the Home Office in the United Kingdom that was hosted at the Alan Turing Institute. So we stay coordinated that way.
So that international coordination, it's interesting you bring that up because that's something that in talking with our Deputy Undersecretary, Julie Brewer, earlier this season, she mentioned the importance of sharing information. And the S&T's role is really about building up that scientific understanding of these new and emerging concepts. So I think it's great to hear that we're continuing to do that, especially in an emerging space like adversarial AI, where it's about making sure that everyone has the information they need to increase their security. And we're really trying to look for information and resources from everywhere we can.
You're exactly right. Just thinking about cybersecurity as a model, if there's a 0 day, right, somewhere, everybody needs to know about it and quickly to patch our systems before we all get attacked. And the same will be true here in
Mhm.
the AI space. So it's great to share information on our R&D, to be efficient with our resources, develop those kind of partnerships, but we also need to share information on the threats and on the vulnerabilities, and that will make us all more secure.
And when we say 0 day, can you let folks know what that is in case they're not familiar?
Yeah, sure. So typically in cybersecurity, when you hear people doing scans, for example, with Norton antivirus or whatever, and that happens at all different levels in a host-based machine or a network, those scans are typically detecting signatures of known exploits and
Mhm.
vulnerabilities. So when you have exploits, vulnerabilities that are unknown, typically that's what you call a 0 day. And that means you have 0 days to patch your systems before there's an effective attack against them.
I think you've touched on this in talking about the threats and how this shows up in the world. But just to reiterate for folks, why do you think the average person should care about adversarial AI and what should they be looking out for in this field?
So, of the things we've talked about so far, the ones that I would be most concerned about as an average citizen, let's say I'm not looking at this from Amy Henninger with her S&T hat on, but just Amy Henninger, private citizen, that would definitely be the threat of deepfakes,
Yeah.
right? That would be the one that I would watch the most for, which you can think of as an extension of phishing emails, right? We've learned how to deal with phishing emails as a society, most of us, maybe not all the time, 100%. And they're getting better, right? Phishing emails used to be different and they are getting more personalized and easier to fall for.
Hmm.
But the deep fakes is phishing emails on steroids.
Yeah.
And now it's faces and now it's bodies and it's voices and it's the way you talk and it's the inflections that you use. And so that's what I would be most concerned about.
In your work here at S&T, what has surprised you the most about what you've seen over the years or just about how this particular subject has evolved?
That's a great question. So I've only been at DHS for 2 years. This is actually my first ever regular government job.
Ooh.
Yeah, my job has always been in industry or the FFRDC space, and all the jobs I've had for the government, which I have been a government employee before, but they've always been term positions, 2 year job, 4 year job, 3 year job, whatever. So this is actually my first ever government job. What surprised me the most about this was as I dug deeper into it, and of course, the undersecretary gets credit for this because he had the vision and the intuition and the knowledge of how it impacts the homeland. He had a much clearer picture of that than I did. But as I started to dig into this more and more, I came to understand that it really is not just an academic threat, but that it's a real threat and it's a real threat to homeland now. And in my past jobs, my last job specifically in the DoD, I was a senior advisor for software and security for the director of operational test and evaluation. And in that job, I was the last person in the Pentagon to take a technical look at the assessments, cybersecurity assessments and software testing assessments of all the programs of record on the director's oversight list. So in that job, I had people from FFRDCs and labs coming to me saying, oh, look, you can put stickies on a stop sign and really mess up an autonomous vehicle. We've got to do something about this now. Or you can put this shirt on and completely evade facial recognition systems. We have to do something about this now. And those were very interesting to me in that role, but they weren't important to me yet in that
Okay.
role because we didn't have the fielded systems that were going to be attacked by those kinds of attacks, right?
Sure.
My mission was get equipment into the field.
Right.
Even though I knew that was important and interesting and someday it would be something we had to do, it wasn't the crocodile closest to my canoe, right? I had cyber attacks I had to worry about. It was much easier to do a cyber attack and take something out than it was to do an AI-based attack and take something out. So I came to DHS with that mindset. I came from that space to a space where I'm supposed to be looking more into the future, which is an S&T, right? I'm like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. I should be looking at adversarial AI now. I used to be a customer for that, for the people who are working in that space, but now I'm the person working in that space. But then as I started to understand and think through the attacks like we talked about and understand the implications for Homeland Security missions, it became obvious to me that there are some missions that are at risk today because of vulnerabilities due to adversarial AI.
And T&E is testing.
Testing and evaluation.
There we
Yeah.
go. I know we love acronyms, but it's always fun to just let people in on the secrets we're really talking about.
I'm glad you're doing that. Thank you.
It sounds like you've had a really rewarding and very interesting career. I wonder if you can walk us through a little bit more of what brought you to S&T.
Yeah, I would love to. Well, let me start going backwards, I guess. So the reason I took the job at S&T, so earlier in my career, I'd been the person in charge of AI. So I worked at an AI company right out of graduate school
Mhm.
for about 5 years. And this is before AI was cool, right? I like to
You were
tell
on the
people
ground floor.
I was doing AI before it was cool. So that was a great job. But I got to be an AI person, right? And
Mhm.
I got to be a software person. I got to be a cybersecurity person. I got to be a modeling and simulation person, a live virtual constructive person, a data analytics person. And where I come from, you can call yourself an expert if you've got 10,000 hours in the field, right?
Sure.
And I am unfortunately old enough that I can say I have 10,000 hours in all those fields.
I don't think that's unfortunate at all. I think that's a huge benefit.
You're very sweet. Thank you. So I got to do all those in my career, and they're not orthogonal to each other. There's a lot of overlap, right? But I got to do all those things. And there was a job in S&T where you got to be the branch chief over a portfolio that includes all those things.
Mhm.
I was the branch chief for the advanced computing branch. That's the job I hired in for. And in the advanced computing branch, we had a tech center in cybersecurity, and a tech center in artificial intelligence, and a tech center in data analytics, and one in quantum information sciences, and one in modeling and simulation. So that was the first time in my career I got a chance to do it all, right? I got to do all of those things at once, which was great fun because I got to bring my experience from earlier in my career, having done all those things before, and think about where there are intersections between those things, where there are seams between those things. So that's why I took the job in S&T. I can work in any of those spaces, which is awesome. But the one I'm working in right now is at the intersection of AI and cybersecurity, adversarial AI, which is a very comfortable place for me to be in. I really like it a lot, and it still lets me work across a couple different fields at the same time.
I think that's fantastic to hear that you get to this position where you really get to apply all of the knowledge that you've built over your career. I
Yeah.
think that's it's like particularly rewarding and rare. So congrats on that. Is there anything that you had in mind that you wanted to be when you grow up? Like when you were envisioning your life, little Amy, were you like, oh man, I really can't wait to work in AI and information systems? What did you want to be when you grew up?
When I was a little kid, I don't know that I think I didn't really have a one thing when I was a little kid, but I went to college thinking I was going to be a high school math teacher and a counselor, a high school counselor.
Very
That
cool.
was kind of like where I started. I love to learn. I think
Hmm.
that maybe is in my greatest strength and greatest weakness at the same time. So I love to learn, and I would learn something and I'm like, oh, I want to learn more about this. So I would go get a degree in this one. And then I would learn more. And the more I learned, the more I realized there's so much I don't know.
Yeah, it's very humbling and exciting when you find that little thread of information that you're like, oh, I have to know more about this. Where does this go? What's possible here?
It's like I have this big map and I'm trying to connect dots and fill in gaps. That's one of the things I like about my job now is that I get to learn so much doing research. You have to do a lot of scrubbing of the literature and
Hmm.
figuring things out. And I really enjoy that part of the job.
Amy, just getting to know you a little bit better. Where are you from? And what's something that folks might be surprised to know about you?
So originally, I am from Downers Grove, Illinois. So a suburb of Chicago, a western suburb of Chicago, not too far from Argonne Labs. Yeah, so that's where I grew up, spent my life up until high school years. And then I moved further south in the state to a place called Glen Carbon, which was another suburb, but on the Illinois side of St. Louis. And that's where I finished my high school years. What's something people would be surprised to know? Gosh, that's a tough one. What would people be surprised to know about me? So I trained with the NSA Cyber Red Team for 200 hours for a month and a half. That
Wow,
was, yeah, most people don't know about that. That was a ton of fun. Yeah. So I have 6 degrees. Most people don't know that.
that's impressive.
So yeah,
6?
I said I like to learn, right? So yeah. So that it's a little over the top maybe, but
Are they
yeah,
all undergraduate or is there a mix?
a mix. Yeah.
Ooh,
There's a
what's your
mix.
favorite one?
My favorite one. I think my favorite one is my computer engineering degree. That was the one I enjoyed the most. Yeah.
Nice.
They're all good. They were all fun, but that's my favorite.
I know it feels, man, when I retire, I do want to just go back to school and be like, I
Really?
think I'll learn a little bit more about this over here.
Are you that way too? So what
Yeah.
did you study in school?
I studied history in undergrad and
Oh,
international relations in grad school.
oh, fantastic. Do you have
And
a
now
special thing in history that's like your favorite?
I focused a lot on British history. And so I translated that into US UK relations on the international relations side. So I think it was just because I could read all the primary documents since they were in English.
Yeah, nice.
Oh, yeah. Can you tell us what the 6 degrees are?
Yeah, sure. I told you earlier I wanted to be a high school teacher, a math teacher. So I have a
Hmm.
math degree and I have a psychology degree. That was my plan to be a counselor. And then I learned about something called human factors engineering, which sounded very interesting to me. I learned about that in a psychology class, and they said, if you want to be a great human factors engineer, you would have a degree in psychology and math and industrial engineering. I'm like, huh, okay. So I got a degree in industrial engineering. And then I got a job, a real job, and was doing a lot of work in simulation, but for like process optimization kinds of
Hmm.
simulation. And turned out I had basically developed a simulation model of a reconfigurable F-15, F-16 cockpit simulation, which was a training simulation.
Ooh,
So I was developing a simulation model of it, how to build a simulator, basically. And I thought, oh, wow, simulators, this is a whole new thing in simulation I didn't know about. So I wanted to learn more about that. And that's how I got into computer engineering. And then I switched jobs and got my PhD and then I moved into AI, right? Because then you can all of a sudden you can combine simulations with AI, which is what I wanted to do next. So that's how I got into computer engineering and AI. Yeah.
I
Oh, so my two master's degree are engineering management and computer engineering. My PhD is computer engineering.
wow. I think you might have the most degrees of anyone we've had on the podcast so far.
When I was working at that AI company I told you about, I opened an office for them, a profit and loss center. And the first guy I hired, he was an intern, and he was working on his 5th degree. Such a good guy. I just adored him. He was
Whoa.
such a good worker. And he was working on his 5th degree when I hired him, his PhD actually. And I used to tease him. I'd say, "You're bringing down the office average, buddy." We still have a good laugh about that. But yeah, he's a good kid, but
To
not
get
a kid anymore. But yeah, we laughed about that a lot.
You got to get those numbers up. Those are rookie numbers.
Yeah, you need one more. Come on.
Exactly. Get with the program. Well, Amy, thank you so much for being with us today. This has been an absolutely wonderful conversation.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you, Brittany. You made it easy.
And thank you all for listening to Technologically Speaking. Tune in next time, and we will see you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to Technologically Speaking. To learn more about what you've heard in this episode, check out the show notes on our website and follow us on Apple Podcasts and YouTube and on social media at DHS SciTech. DHS SCITECH. Bye.